Hey there, lovely soul. Welcome back to Noah's Stories, my dear family. Before we begin, please join me in a heartfelt prayer. Heavenly Father, please bless everyone listening to this story, grant them happiness, peace, and guide them toward finding their true love. Amen. My beautiful family, please don't forget to like, comment, and share this video. Your support means everything to me. And today's story is about a young woman who carried the weight of her past to a quiet, unfamiliar town, where, without expecting it, love was waiting for her in the simplest, most unexpected form. Clara Harlow was born into a world of flashing lights and magazine covers. As the only daughter of the Harlow family owners of a luxury fashion empire based in Chicago, she had been raised to become the face of the brand, the irreplaceable Heiress. To the outside world, Clara had everything: beauty, wealth, fame, and a perfect fiancé, Daniel Prescott, heir to a powerful financial conglomerate. But behind the polished surface was a young woman slowly suffocating. Clara felt like a product packaged for public consumption. No room for mistakes, no space to breathe, no right to love anyone who didn't fit the brand. Daniel didn't love her. He loved the image she projected, and their engagement was little more than a calculated merger. One night, after an extravagant engagement party, Clara quietly walked out of her penthouse. She cut ties, discarded her identity, and left with nothing but some cash and a few personal belongings. Using the name Claire Hudson, she disappeared from Chicago without telling a soul, leaving behind only a handwritten note. "I need to find myself. Please don't look for me. I'm safe." And so began the journey. A journey to freedom, to truth, and to a kind of love that asked for nothing but honesty. Willow Bay appeared like an unplanned stop, yet it became the first place Claire Hudson could finally breathe after years of being shaped by expectations. The small coastal town was unremarkable, just weathered wooden houses, a quiet harbor, and cobblestone streets winding through sleepy blocks. But it was that very simplicity that made Claire feel safe. No one knew who she was, no one cared about the Harlow name. She rented a small cottage overlooking the sea, with a creaky front porch and sun-drenched windows. Inside, the furnishings were modest: a faded armchair, a few crooked paintings on the wall, and a kitchen table just big enough for two. But Claire had never felt a place so warm. She paid in cash, gave no real name, and asked no questions. The next morning, while walking through town, a small sign caught her eye: "Part-time art instructor needed," taped in the window of the community art center. On impulse, Claire stepped inside. She was greeted by Marjorie, the center's director, a sharp-eyed, soft-spoken woman in her 60s. "You don't look like someone who needs a job," Marjorie said, eyeing Claire's wrinkled cashmere coat. "Maybe I don't need one," Claire replied, "but I think I want one." After a short conversation and a few digital paintings shown from her phone, Marjorie nodded. "There's something in your eyes, something lost, and something wanting to start over. People like you make great teachers." That afternoon, Claire taught her first drawing class in a small room next to the pottery studio. The kids were noisy and curious, but none of them asked where she came from. For the first time in a long while, Claire didn't feel the need to be anyone but herself. The music led her. One early autumn afternoon, with sunlight still skimming the waves and the tide gently kissing the shore, Claire walked barefoot along the beach behind her cottage. She heard piano notes. Nothing like a pop tune or familiar melody, but something original, intricate, and aching, like someone was pouring their soul into sound. Drawn in, she followed the music to a wooden house tucked behind a line of trees. It was simple but alive, with wide windows facing the sea. Through the glass, she saw a man at a grand piano. His fingers moved with a grace and precision that could only come from years of discipline and feeling. Without thinking, she stepped closer. The wood creaked underfoot and the music stopped. The man lifted his head. "I'm sorry," Claire said quickly. "I didn't mean to interrupt. Your music, it's beautiful." He smiled faintly, but his eyes didn't quite meet hers. They searched the space around him. "You're not interrupting," he said in a warm, resonant voice. "Music is meant to be heard. I'm Julian Reed." "Claire Hudson," she replied, the name now fitting more comfortably. Julian nodded. "New to Willow Bay?" "Yes," she said. I'm starting over." A moment passed between them, soft and unspoken. Then Julian gestured to a chair on the porch. They sat. At first, the conversation was cautious, but gradually it opened. Claire noticed how he never looked directly at her, then realized Julian was blind. "How long have you been blind?" she asked, not bothering to tiptoe around it. Julian chuckled softly. "You're the first to ask me that right away. I appreciate it. 5 years, 2 months, and 11 days. Not that I'm counting." Claire smiled. Something about his honesty felt like safety. As the sun turned the ocean gold, she finally stood to leave. Julian couldn't see her, but somehow he understood her better than anyone who ever had. Since their first meeting, Claire often stopped by Julian's house after her classes, sometimes just to listen to him play. On some afternoons, she brought her sketches and painted quietly while he practiced piano. There were no grand conversations between them, just a calm presence, a stillness Claire had never known in her old world. Julian taught music at the community center, just down the hall from where Claire led her art classes. One afternoon, Marjorie suggested a combined workshop, one where children could hear and see art together. Julian agreed right away. "If you lead the visuals, I'll take care of the sound," he said. The class became something special. Julian composed melodies that expressed different emotions. Claire guided the children to translate those feelings into colors and shapes. The kids, shy at first, grew excited under their gentle guidance. Every class became an experience, and Claire realized she was living honestly now. No pretending, no performing, just being. One evening after class, they walked along the beach. Julian walked slowly but steadily. Claire described the sunset to him, the water gleaming like liquid gold, the sky streaked with fire-toned orange and red. "It's strange," Julian said. "I used to see, but no one ever described it to me like that." "Do you ever miss seeing?" Claire asked softly. A long pause. "I'm not sure," he said. "When I lost my sight, I also lost everything that used to disappoint me. But sometimes, I wish I could see what your voice looks like." Claire turned away, smiling to herself. He couldn't see her, but somehow he was seeing the deepest parts of who she truly was. Claire had always known that the past would catch up with her. She just didn't expect it to come crashing in on such an ordinary autumn morning. Claire was preparing for her art class when the door to the studio creaked open and Marjorie stepped inside. Not in a hurry, not with panic, but with an expression that said everything. "Is something wrong?" Claire asked, setting down her watercolor tray. Marjorie didn't answer. Instead, she handed her a folded newspaper. On the front page was a photo. Clara Harlow, radiant in a shimmering evening gown, smiling the kind of practiced smile one learns under stage lights. Beneath it, bold letters read, "Fashion heiress missing, family offers $1 million reward for any information." Claire felt the breath leave her lungs. She lowered the paper onto the table, her hands clenching into fists. "You've known, haven't you?" she asked quietly. Marjorie nodded, then slowly took a seat beside her. "Since your second day here," she replied gently. "I used to work in media. Your face was everywhere for a while, but the girl who stood in front of me wasn't that tabloid image. You were kind, and sometimes kindness is all someone needs to deserve a second chance." Tears stung Claire's eyes. Never before had she felt so seen, not because of her name or her family, but for who she truly was. "I have to tell Julian," she whispered, "before he hears it from someone else." That afternoon, Claire stood on Julian's porch, hands shaking, a letter folded tightly in her coat pocket. Words she had rehearsed all day vanished the moment the door opened. And he smiled. "Claire," he said warmly, his voice full of that familiar tenderness. "You're here." She nodded, guilt twisting inside her. He stepped aside, inviting her in. The house was filled with the faint scent of pine and the last lingering notes of an unfinished melody. "I made tea," he said as she sat down. "You're quieter than usual today." Claire stared at the cup in her hands, then looked up. "Julian," she began, her voice hoarse. "There's something I need to tell you." He paused, setting down the teapot gently. "What is it?" "I'm not who you think I am," she said quickly, as if tearing off a bandage. "My real name is Clara Harlow." The room fell silent. Julian furrowed his brow. "Clara Harlow?" he repeated slowly, as if translating every syllable in his head. "My family owns a fashion empire," she continued. "I ran away from an arranged engagement, from expectations, from a version of myself I didn't want to be. I never meant to deceive you, but I also didn't have the courage to tell you the truth. And now, I can't let you hear it from someone else." Julian said nothing. He rose slowly and walked toward the window, facing the sea like he was trying to breathe again. "So, everything you told me, everything we shared," his voice cracked, "it was all from behind a mask?" "No," Claire said quickly. "Everything between us was real, every feeling, every moment. Only the name was false." "I trusted you," he said quietly. "I didn't have your face to rely on. I trusted your words, your presence, the way you made me feel. And now, I'm not sure if any of it was real or if I was just being naive." "Julian, I am very sorry," Claire said. He didn't answer. His silence was louder than anything he could have said. Claire knew something sacred between them had shattered. She reached into her coat and placed the letter on the table. "It's all in here, everything I was too afraid to say aloud. If you don't want to read it, I understand." Julian didn't move toward the envelope. He simply asked, "Why me?" Claire inhaled deeply. "Because you couldn't see me, so you truly saw me." She stood, tears sliding down her cheeks. "I only hope that someday, if you still want to, you'll see me with your own eyes. Not as Clara Harlow, just me." Then she turned and walked out of the house, the only place that had ever felt safe, leaving behind an unopened letter, a pair of searching eyes, and a man who no longer knew what to believe, his heart, or what he had never seen at all. Julian didn't touch the letter all night. It lay on the table beside the piano, something both familiar and too difficult to face. Rain fell. Wind slipped through the windows. The house, once warm, now felt cold and distant. The next morning, he held the envelope in his hands and stepped out of the house, heading to the only place he could trust right now, Marjorie's little art gallery. She was sweeping the floor when he walked in. "Julian," she said, a little surprised, "are you all right?" He nodded, then held out the letter. "I need your help." Marjorie looked at the envelope, then back at him. She didn't ask anything more. Gently, she opened it and began to read. Her voice was slow at first, then steady and warm with emotion. Claire told everything. Her childhood in the flash of cameras, the feeling of being trapped in a world where there was no room for mistakes, the fear of being seen but never truly understood. And then she wrote about him, about how for the first time someone who couldn't see her had seen her the most clearly. "I'm not running away from the light," the letter ended. "I'm just searching for a place to be myself, and if you choose to see me, I'll be there, waiting for you with nothing to hide." When Marjorie finished reading, Julian sat in silence for a long time. She placed a hand gently on his shoulder and gave it a soft pat. "You know," she said in her calm, low voice, "not everyone is lucky enough to be loved that honestly." Julian gripped the letter in his hands. He lifted his face. He couldn't see a thing, but something inside him had changed. Julian's fingers curled slightly around the edge of the letter. "Can you help me make an appointment with the eye specialist?" he asked. "I want to see her," he said softly. "Not just with my heart anymore." Marjorie smiled. "I think she'll be very happy to hear that." Claire didn't run anymore. Right after leaving the letter for Julian, she caught the first train back to Chicago. She stepped into the cold, polished family estate and faced the one man she thought would never understand her. Mr. Harlow saw her and his eyes reddened, though his face remained stern. "You're back," was all he said. Claire didn't apologize. She simply said, "I can't marry someone I don't love, and I can't live the life you planned for me." There was silence, long and heavy, but then something unexpected happened. Her father nodded. As long as you live with honesty and take full responsibility for the life you choose, he said, I won't stop you anymore. Claire almost couldn't believe it. She left the next day, packing light not to escape, but to return to herself. A week later, she stood at the door of Marjorie's gallery, knocking with a mix of nervousness and hope. You're back? Marjorie asked, smiling. I want to teach again, Claire said, if you still need someone. Marjorie didn't reply immediately. She simply stepped aside and opened the door wider. The kids have been missing you. 1 month later, the door of the clinic swung open. Julian stepped out wearing sunglasses, and seeing, dimly, for the first time in years. His vision hadn't fully returned, but the doctors called it a remarkable success. He could make out silhouettes, light, color, shapes. For Julian, that was enough. And the first thing he wanted to see was Claire. Marjorie brought him to the gallery, where Claire had returned to teach. Julian stood at the doorway, hesitant, but when he heard her voice, gentle, warm, filled with patience for her young students, he knew he couldn't turn away. Claire, he said, not loudly, but just enough for her to hear. She froze. The children paused, brushes mid-air. Everything went still. Claire slowly turned around, eyes wide in disbelief. Julian removed his sunglasses. His eyes were still cloudy. He had to squint to make out her figure. But in that moment, when his gaze met hers, the world seemed to stop. You can see me? Claire whispered. Not clearly, Julian smiled, voice trembling, but enough to know. You're really here. I've imagined this moment 100 times, he whispered, and it's still not enough. There were no more words. Claire stepped toward him, slowly, like moving too fast might shatter the moment. Julian reached out, letting his hand find her cheek. A familiar gesture, but this time accompanied by sight. You look just like you said you did, he murmured, and somehow, even more. Claire laughed through her tears. She placed her hand over his, holding it there. I thought you'd never forgive me. I was angry, Julian admitted, and scared, but you were right. I've never seen anyone more clearly than I see you, even when I still had perfect sight. Outside, the sunlight bathed the world in gentle gold, and inside, the two of them stood within a frame they had painted themselves, one made of trust, of hurt, of healing, and of something real. Summer came to Willow Bay with a soft golden light, like a quiet blessing. In the little seaside art room, Claire stood among her young students, guiding them as they painted clouds and waves. Julian sat nearby beside an old piano, sorting through the melodies he once composed in darkness. Now, he wasn't completely blind anymore. But he didn't need to see everything. Just seeing her was enough. After class, they cleaned up together. Claire tied her hair back, hands still stained with watercolor. Julian watched her, his gaze warm and quietly amazed, like he still hadn't gotten used to the fact that he could truly see her. Is there something strange on my face? She teased. Julian smiled. No, I'm just still not over the miracle of getting to see you every day. Claire leaned down and kissed his forehead. I'm still here, and this time, I'm staying. That afternoon, they walked along the beach. There wasn't much to say, just waves, the scent of salt, and a calm that felt hard-won. Julian stopped and pulled out a small silver chain with a key on it. I thought about a ring, he said, but somehow a key feels more like us. Claire looked at him, her eyes brimming. This key is to the home we're building, not with bricks, but with trust, forgiveness, and freedom. She reached out and took the key. I'll use it every day, she whispered. Not to unlock a door, Julian said, but to remind us that no one has to pretend to be loved. We've both walked through darkness, Claire added, but now we know what real light feels like. They stood there beneath the evening sky. No more masks, no more secrets, no more shadows. Just two people seeing each other clearly, through eyes, through hearts, and through everything they had survived together.